mainstream media and international community have largely ignored the atrocities and genocide that is going on in my home country of South Africa. As economic refugees living abroad, we as independent media fight to expose the truth and find solutions for the many suffering and impoverished people still stuck in South Africa. This is Stop South African Genocide, hosted by Mel V and Karin Smith, live on CCN. Greetings everybody, wherever you may be on planet Earth. My name is Mel V and it is great to be with you once again. This is Stop South African Genocide coming to you live on Conscious Consumer Network. And of course, I'm joined by my most esteemed co-host, Karin Smith. Hey, Karin.
Hi. It's always lovely to be back on air with you, Mel.
You know, I love doing the show with you, Karin. And of course, tonight we are joined by another lovely lady guest. And Georgia is a Californian talk show host. You live in California, Georgia, is that right?
I am a radio talk show on AM radio here in California, 1080 AM radio in Santa Cruz, California, Mel. And thanks to both of you, to you and Karin, for inviting me to join you today to talk about this atrocity that's not being talked about anywhere in the media. I'm delighted to be here and be a part of this.
Well, Karin and I have been on a bit of a mission with the second season of Stop South African Genocide. We took a break last year and we jumped back in for this year, and we decided we're going to get a hold of talk show hosts like yourself, people who are really carrying forward this narrative. And I'll tell you what's been great for myself to observe is, compared to a year ago, just how many more people who have shows, who have a platform, who have a voice, are now standing up and not only talking about the South African cause, but realizing how that plays into the bigger picture and the example that it is to other places in the world that are now seeing the same socioeconomic patterns playing out into their reality with devastating effects. So it's really a pleasure to have you with us, and wonderful to see people getting a grasp of this and wanting to come out and speak about all this nonsense.
Well, as I said, I'm delighted to be here. I have been talking about this for a couple of years here, sounding a warning bell long before we saw what is now going on over there. So it's really critical now. People are dying, terrible things are happening, and the fact, ladies, that no one in the mainstream media is addressing this, and no one in our government is really addressing this, continues to just stun me. I just can't imagine any other group of people going through what we're seeing happening in South Africa would be overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely.
None of us can believe it. I mean, there are a million theories of why the mainstream is ignoring it. But for people like ourselves who have been ringing alarm bells and shouting from the rooftops for years, Mel's been doing it for more than 10 years. I've been doing it for over 8 years. We just don't understand why there are these people who are supposedly such conservative radio shows and conservative mainstream media, but they will not touch the subject. And it's for me totally, I don't understand how worldwide the entire media has been silenced.
Well, I think what we're suffering with and what we're seeing here in America play out is this anti-whiteism. When you have a duly elected president who cannot even say at a rally or in any of his speeches, thank you to the white people who got him elected. Now, he can say thank you to the Black Americans, to the Hispanic Americans, to any other group, but never will you hear President Trump mention the word white. That is what we're dealing with, this anti-whiteism, and the white people seem to just, I don't know what to say about them. They seem to let it happen. Except for people like me who's been talking up about it, which is why I'm now a target at my station and have been for some time, because I've been talking about the white genocide in our own country, ladies, in our own country. Not dead bodies like you're seeing in Africa, but this slow ethno-cleansing, this displacing of our people, flooding us with foreigners and people of color to turn us into a brown country. Yeah, it is white genocide.
And yet, when you talk about minorities, which is everybody's cry, we're the minority, and so we need super extra careful handling and extra bonuses and help. Who is actually the world minority? The whites. We are 6.5% of the world population. So if any minority needed to be coddled, it's us.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Can you imagine a world without white people? Can you just even imagine what kind of a world that would be? I can't. And it's starting to not look too good. I mean, we are a minority in the world, and we're becoming a minority here in America slowly. So, yeah, it's very worrisome to those of us who fight for the right for our people to have the right to exist, as all people do. I've never said anything about other races not having the right to exist. I'm simply fighting for our survival, for our people, white European people, by the way, who founded this country, who gave us everything that all of these other people enjoy. We shared it with the world. I'm just fighting for us to have the right to continue to exist.
There you go. That's exactly the South African story. We landed in an empty space, except for the Khoisan. But other than that, they didn't have the wheel. They didn't ride horses. They didn't have a building over one story. They didn't have cities. We provided it all. And then during the apartheid years, the Black population grew by 920% in South Africa. So if apartheid was so bad for the Black population, if we were really murdering them by the million in the streets, the streets were running with Black blood, why did our population grow so much? It wasn't just people coming from the north and wanting part of the economy. It was the fact that white medicine increased their life expectancy, decreased the number of baby deaths, stopped them dying from things like horrific diseases. It was white medicine as well as good nutrition, because they did subsistence farming, and they still like their pup, which is a cornmeal porridge. That is what they lived on, but we brought them good nutrition, taught them how to farm vegetables, how to eat healthy. The doctors in the hospitals, we introduced to them clean water, toilets, those kind of things. So their population grew. In 48 years, the Black population grew 920%. So if we were that wicked, how did that happen?
Well, I find it interesting that those same people we're talking about have been walking over the earth for thousands of years, walking over their earth with all of those resources underneath. Why didn't they do something with it? Why didn't they build something out of those resources? You see, they're incapable of doing that. We have come in and done everything you just described. But you see, we are the imperialists. We are the evil white people that came in there. Those people wouldn't even exist if they hadn't gotten help from the people who came there to improve their way of living.
George, I believe they would still exist, but the thing is, as you've seen, where the colonialists, the settlers, the white horrible people have been chased out of these countries in Africa, they have regressed back to tribal living, which maybe is the way they want to live. I've got nothing against them living in their own way, in their own conditions, under their own rules, whatever. I have got nothing against that whatsoever. Everybody should be allowed to live the way that they are most comfortable.
I agree.
But then don't blame us for having a better standard of living. You know,
That's absolutely it, Karen. I believe all cultures have a right to their own heritage, to their culture. But to try to mix these cultures, as we're doing certainly here in our country today, it's simply not working. Diversity is not our greatest strength. It is a weakness. It is destroying the culture and the heritage of what this country was founded to be. So yes, go live your life. Do it the way your culture has done it for thousands of years. But let's not cross pollinate it. Let's not try to bring everybody in together and think somehow that we're going to be able to go along to get along. It simply doesn't happen. It just doesn't. With multiculturalism, you will eventually run into trouble.
well, absolutely. I think one of the things that the Mexicans have been saying in the United States is we're going to outbreed you. And that is the truth, because we are going to take over America by outbreeding you. Well, that is true because white families are getting smaller and smaller because we want the best for our children, and things are terribly expensive. The incomes are not that huge. So our families, instead of being 5 or 6 children, or as one of my relatives came from a family of 13 children, instead of that, we're having 1 or 2. But the other colors, and that I don't mean that racist, that's the only way I can think of to describe it, is are still breeding huge families. And so they are going to outbreed us. We've been outbred in South Africa. There's no question about that. Families are not replacing themselves, never mind replacing +1. So
Well, let's not forget, Karen, the other part of this puzzle with whites not having bigger families. There has been an out-and-out war on straight white males
yes.
for a very long time.
Yes.
And there has been a promotion through Hollywood, through the glass toilet, which I call the television, through the media. There has been a promotion of biracial family. So white men have really been so emasculated that they're no longer wanting to have families and be with these women, because these women have been so indoctrinated through women's studies, through universities, through the Hollywood films, commercials, TV, you name it. That's what's happened to us. They are continuing to breed in all kinds of ways, and we are not. We are not.
Yeah. The feminist movement, much as I admire them in the beginning, where they trained themselves to the fences in London and demanded the vote and all those good things, that I admire immensely, because we as women would not be where we are today without those. Emily Pankhurst, was it not? The original feminist who chained herself to the chamber, Houses of Parliament in London. Without those ladies, we would still be 2nd or 3rd class citizens. So I admire that and I thank them for it. But I think that we've carried it a little bit too far, because women are not men. We were not designed to go and dig up holes in the street and all of those men things. Although we can do it, I'm sure, and I know women do it, I still am old-fashioned enough to believe that women are the nurturers, and our place is really to support our husbands, raise our children, spread love and nurturing and good meals, and make a warm, family loving home. Although we are perfectly able, and we do it, you do it, Mel does it, I do it, we all do a job. Not all of us get paid for it, but we have a job outside of the home, which makes us interesting. You know, if you're just a housewife and all you do all day, and I'm not denigrating housewives. My mom was one, and I would have loved to have been one. That was my sole life ambition, was to be a housewife and raise 4 kids. So I'm not denigrating them at all. But if your entire conversation is dirty nappies and dust and the vacuum cleaner broke today, I think you could be a very boring person and not use your potential. So
Well, I kind of agree and kind of disagree with that, Karen, and let me tell you why. First off, John D. Rockefeller funded the feminist movement with the intention not only to bring in more taxes, but to basically destroy the family unit, which when you destroy the family unit, you will take down eventually a healthy society. You cannot have a thriving, healthy society without a strong family unit. Now, I happen to come from a mother who raised 6 of us. I'm the last of 6. She was a full-time mother. I have 3 children. When I had my children and until they became much older, I was a full-time mom. I did not think that that was a boring job or an unimportant job. My feeling about raising a child, it's the most important thing a human being can do is to raise a whole, productive, contributing human being. So it wasn't until my kids were grown, pretty much grown, that I started getting back involved into my life and doing what I do. So I know what you're saying, and it's what these young women have been taught and told, that to stay home and raise a child means you're not actualizing your potential. But I guess from my point of view, the potential of raising full humans, just think about it, ladies. If every woman did that job, the world would be a great place. We wouldn't have these misfits, these confused kids, these gender confused young people. I mean, they have kidnapped our children because women who work have handed their child over to either schools and caretakers during the day, and they are now a very small influence in that child's life.
Yeah, I think that's essentially what I was trying to say, that I don't denigrate housewives. They have got the most important job in the world. But the original feminist movement gave us rights that we didn't have. I mean, we can sign checks today. We can have our own bank account. We can vote, which we couldn't previous to that because your husband was your keeper. And I would really hate that, to be passed from my father as my keeper to my husband as my keeper. I don't have the kind of personality that would deal with that well.
Yeah,
so they did us a favor in that regard, but we've carried it too far, where they are now saying that, I read this the other day, one of our politicians here in the USA said that it's a criminal offense to be a non-working mother, to be a stay-at-home mother. Now, for me, that is ridiculous. That is your, as you said, Georgia, it's your prime job, is to raise your kids well, to be self-reliant, decent contributors to society. And without the mother's influence, you're not going to have that. But I think Hillary Clinton is responsible for a lot of that, because was she not the one who said it takes a village?
Yes, ma'am.
And so your kids don't, she said, your kids don't belong to you, they belong to the state. So,
what a scary statement that is.
Exactly.
But it's playing out.
No, it is, but they forced the situation. The powers that be have forced families to have a working father and a working mother. Otherwise, you can't survive. So, so then they do have your children from cradle to the grave. And it was the Jesuits who said, give me your children until they're age 5 and they're mine for life. Wasn't it a Jesuit who said that?
You know, I had a caller the other day, an older woman who's from India, who's married to a Frenchman living in America and has been for many, many years. And she has raised her children here as a stay-at-home mom. and she was saying, how were my husband and I able to own 3 beautiful homes, one of which we're now living in, raise our children without me working? How were we able to do that, Georgia? And it's really a good question, Karen. I know in many cases lots of women have to work. There's no doubt about it, because maybe the man's job just doesn't earn enough to keep a family going. But in many cases, women want to work. They want to have more stuff because we've become this consumer society where we think we have to have it all. So I don't know where the balance is with that. I mean, maybe if we could go back to having appreciation and gratitude for the simple things in life, we could get back to some kind of sanity with this, because you can't let the state raise your children. We see what's coming out of that, these millennials who don't have a clue about real life.
Yeah, and the frightening thing about that is that everybody wants to start at the top. So you have to have a university degree, a college degree. There's no blue-collar workers being raised anymore, because that is below everybody. You can't be a mechanic or a welder or a pipe fitter or any of those things, because good grief, no. That's just not status enough, and we might get our hands dirty. Now, when I was being raised, there were as many technical colleges, in fact, probably more than there were universities, because we sent people out into the world ready to work and to earn a living. And possibly that's why the dad only had to work, because I come from a family of 5 children. My mom never worked a day in her life. And we weren't rich by any means, but we never went hungry. And so, yes, your question, the Indian lady's question, is valid. How did they do it when nowadays we think we can't? Are we such a consumer society that we want that fix and we want it now? We're not prepared to budget for it and save for it. I want it today. So I'll abandon my kids and go get the money to do it. Is that how we've become?
Well, don't you think also, ladies, and Mel, I'm not hearing much from you, and I
Mel is sitting there nodding.
This conversation, but we need to talk about affirmative action and how that's played in to why those the training of kids who's, let's say there are a group of kids that are not college qualified. Instead of giving those children some training where they can go out and be a plumber, which is a wonderful career and needed, or some other kind of career that they would be able to be successful at, we push qualified kids out of the way for college, and we put unqualified kids, mostly minority kids, into our universities, who then come out, and not only can they not do the work, they can't do the jobs if they're given to them because of the color of their skin.
Yes, well, that was the downfall of South Africa, was it not? Mel, when they brought in BBBEE.
Yeah, that was, I mean, as I came out of university, I went into university in 94. That was the year Nelson Mandela became president. And of course, that was when things started to go downwards. I got out of university, and that was the first phase of, okay, we're going to start being more, it was going to be an equal split between, you know, black and white job apportioning. So they were going to favor black people, and then it just got more and more severe. And now it's just gone to ridiculous lengths. But I wanted to make a comment there on that woman's lib thing, because it's interesting what you said there, the Rockefellers funded it. Yeah, absolutely. The CIA wholeheartedly steered the whole of that woman's lib thing for the purposes of social engineering. Gloria Steinem was actually the person who started Miss Magazine, which was the media vehicle for the women's lib movement. And she's even admitted in her book that the Women's Lib magazine, which she started, never ever needed paid advertising revenue because it was so well funded by the CIA. She never need paid advertisers. What magazine or media platform do you know that doesn't need paid advertising, people paying for advertising in it? That's what drives consumer media. So this it was clearly getting a lot of money from intelligence agencies, and she admits it in the book. So this is what the narrative of the Women's Lib movement was all about. And we see this happening, the same pattern within South Africa with regards to the freedom movement. The Women's Lib movement, supposedly more freedom and rights for women. The South African anti-apartheid movement, supposedly more rights and freedom for blacks. And I often say this, that they go about saying that if you're anti-apartheid, you're pro-freedom. But the simple fact is, we all know that South Africa is worse off after the presidency of Nelson Mandela than it was before. The blacks are in a worse situation than it was before. The poverty got worse. Nothing got better. The infrastructure got worse. The violence got worse. Everything just got worse. So it's actually under the aegis of making things better for certain demographics. They play in a subversive agenda, which ultimately, it might seem like short-term gratification. Oh, we've got the vote. But you know what? I don't even believe that much in politics anymore. I think it's all contrived from behind the scenes. And, this might be controversial to some people, but I always joke about those people who stand in the queue for hours and just to get that little stain on their thumb, because that's all they're doing. Putting a little X in the box, to me, I don't think actually really makes that much of a difference, because I believe it's contrived from behind the scenes anyway. It doesn't matter what you vote for or who votes for what. It is controlled from people, even the government of South Africa. There's no way they're running the show. It's controlled from people even beyond the borders of South Africa. There's a much bigger agenda going on, and South Africa is central to it and always has been. So, when you're looking at the bigger picture and you're looking at these various freedom movements, you then come into our present day situation where you've got George Soros funding all of these wonderful Occupy, what's the latest one, the Yellow Jackets, and all these kind of things. And of course, they're funding all sorts of really provocative movements in South Africa that are causing a lot of damage there too. Really, really ripping apart the social fabric in any way they can. Pushing really strange cross-sexual agendas, cross-identity agendas, all that kind of thing, which I think is really destroying us, our identity as human beings, and our understanding of first community, but also respect for individuality, and some sort of, it's almost like they're turning it really into a circus and a freak show, so that it can absolutely degenerate into complete and utter chaos.
I couldn't agree more, Mel. It is a global agenda. It's been in play for a very long time. What is happening now is technology. They have the right technology now for the globalists who've been behind this destruction of the world, really, for a very long time. But now with technology having reached the point it has, they can actually push it through. They've tried this before, but technology wasn't quite ready. I don't know if you all are familiar with Patrick Wood's book, Technology Rising. Boy, did he nail it years ago when he said it will be the technocrats that will push us there. And I think that's what we're seeing. So I totally agree with you. This is a much bigger picture. It is a global, worldwide, open border world run by the elite. Just look at the Georgia Guidestones and what they say. They want 500 million humans left on the earth, a pristine planet for those who are the elite, and the rest of us can just be gotten rid of. I mean, that is, I think, their goal. As insane as it sounds, I believe it.
Yes, are they not heading directly in that thing with the abortion until after birth? That scares the hell out of me, because they haven't set an age limit on that. So does that mean when your kid reaches the terrible twos and it's, get rid of it, and when it reaches 7 and it's not doing well at school or is diagnosed ADHD, get rid of it, and when it reaches teenage and becomes, well, just too much for mom to cope with, get rid of it? Does that mean that's coming? And definitely getting rid of anybody over 50 is on the books, because it was in Obamacare, and now New Mexico has passed a bill saying that assisted suicide is now legal. And I just feel that what they're heading for is kill the kids, kill the elderly, and there you've got a real good start on offing half the population.
And kill half of the young white people through opioid abuse. Look at what's happened to the spraying of our foods. Look at what's happened to the drug abuse in this country. Look at what they're spraying in our skies that we don't know what it is. Look at the geoengineering of our weather that is destroying lives, homes, areas that are sliding or burning. It is pretty odd, but there seems to be a plan in play to get rid of the population in one way or another. And I do think the abortion thing and the elderly will play into that, Karen. It's part of what they want to do. They want the planet for themselves. These supremacists, these globalists, that's what they want.
Well, I could see you getting all excited. You had something to say there.
You know, this is such a big topic when you start looking at the globalist agenda, because it's actually cyclical. The rise and fall of civilizations has always, the fall has always been at the end of a huge period of technocracy, war, and, evil and wrongdoing towards each other. And I think we're kind of reaching that point now. And I've recently released my book, The Greatest Discovery, which has kind of put in a much bigger context with regards to iterations of civilization. And we're reaching that point now where if it's gotten so bad, and no jokes, I mean, 90% of the world's population is so ill-programmed by mainstream media that it's almost like they're beyond repair in a way. You know, believe me, Karin and I regularly face heartbreak for all the hard work that we put in, only to have such darkness and ugliness projected at us by ungrateful, confused, angry people who just don't know how else to behave. And you kind of look at this and you go, well, what are we doing this for? Maybe we do need a total reset, because look what we're trying to work towards saving. These people actually probably don't deserve our help. We get to that space regularly, but still we do it because we believe there's a narrative here which needs to continue. There is an awareness here which needs to be built. And if anything, an education process which needs to take place, because for a lot of those people, they're trapped within the fear of their own ignorance. And South Africans particularly are bad with this. And it's a multiple layer thing. And forgive me for anybody who is heavily invested in any form of religious ideology. But I must say that that's one of the things that have a lot of people in South Africa very sort of encrusted and ingrained in this crust of fear. Is it starts with that a fear programming that comes from religion, the fear of God. And this, while you're in a space of fear, you're actually paralyzed. You become helpless. And I don't believe at any point that any one of us are helpless. You know, we can choose whether we are victims or survivors. And the difference is simple between the two. The victim is someone who has given up. Okay, that's the difference between a victim and a survivor, is that, you know, we've all been through, so much trouble, so much drama, so much hecticness. The realities we live in, we have to deal with some pretty awful things every day, particularly for myself and Karin, who make a point of looking into this stuff. But ultimately, it's up to each and every single one of us to overcome the program of fear, which is deliberate, starts from the religious level. And that, you know, if you're talking about the women's liberation thing as well, we live in an extremely patriarchal society where the controlling religions, Catholicism and Islam, are very patriarchal. I mean, the Vatican City has absolutely no woman inhabitants. You'd like to visit there, but you're not allowed to live there if you're a woman within Vatican City. It's only priests and choir boys. Anyway.
Religion is a problem in many ways, in that I get constantly a bunch of Christians calling me or evangelicals calling me and saying, God appointed Donald Trump and God will take care of this. And I keep reminding them, look, okay, God also gave us free will. It really is up to us as men and women to take that free will and do what we need to do to fix this. Do not sit there and rely on your prayers only and your belief that somehow magically God's going to take care of all this. No, it's up to each one of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, religion can get really confusing for people, Mel. I really understand your point and the whole fear-mongering. That we've become a society of fear-mongering. Parents are terrified to let their children outside the door, and yet how many children really are abducted? I mean, if you really look at the numbers, we have made everyone terrified of everything. And that is a good way that governments control the people. If you're in a state of fear all the time, you'll do almost anything to stay safe, right?
Yeah. Mel, you had
Yeah. You know, growing up in South Africa, fear, and I mean, Karin, you and I grew up in South Africa. We know what it's like. Fear actually becomes part of the substructure of your reality. And you don't actually realize just how severe it is until you move away from it and you go, oh my God, I can walk down the street without holding my handbag to my body. You know, I can, put my handbag down on a chair in a restaurant and not be checking it out every 3 minutes to see who's looking at it or wants to steal it. I leave my car unlocked, particularly here where we live in southern Portugal. I mean, it's just community we live in is very safe. I leave my car unlocked, leave stuff in it. Back in South Africa, a friend of mine left an empty box of cigarettes on my front seat, and someone broke into my car for that. Obviously, they thought there were cigarettes inside, but it was empty. But they broke into my car for that. That is how desperate they are. They once broke into my car for a dog blanket. Okay, so this is if they see anything that they perceive can be of use and of value, they will try, to steal it if they are that poor. Whereas in places where we don't have such severe poverty, and there is still poverty here in Portugal, minimum wage is the lowest in Europe, but we still have less of that fear-based construct, which is just an inextricable part of the South African reality, which is why I believe for the longest time it's been the hardest crowd for me to break with my activism and with my message, because they refuse to look past the indoctrination. It's a lot of stubbornness, don't get me wrong, okay? There's a lot of stubbornness within these people because they're of Boer blood, they got a lot of ego, they think they know everything, they're very gung-ho. So first off, you're working with that cultural personality trait, which is tough anyway. Then it's trying to break past that wall of ignorance, that fear-based programming, and oh my God, then the religion. And then if you can get past all that, you might actually be able to drop a few pearls of wisdom into them to make them realize who's putting the strings. Actually, religion's all part of it. Nelson Mandela is part of he's not a saint as everybody makes him out to be. He's actually been part of the globalist agenda right from the very beginning. Being, a communist, and we all know that there's a socialist, Marxist, communist agenda playing out in South Africa at the moment, and always has been. There was a reason why Mandela was put into jail. America even supported it because for a while they were anti-communist. So it's when you start to put all these things together and you realize how the fear-based programming we have actually been subjected to. And you made an interesting point there about how everyone, such a low statistics on children getting abducted, yet people are afraid of the kids going. Now, when I was growing up in South Africa, in Johannesburg, up until the age of 10, I lived there. I used to ride around the streets of Killarney, around Killarney Mall. I went to Houghton Primary on my bicycle as a kid, under the age of 10, with no fears. I'd come home from school, my mum was working. I would come home, get my bicycle, go riding in the streets. And I was a free spirit. I never feared anything. And then suddenly we moved into a house with gates and security and all of this. And for a while we used to leave the bedroom doors open for the dogs to wander out. But when then our house was robbed and we started putting alarms in with more crime, we eventually turned ourselves into a more fortified way of living, to the point that by the time I got to my teens, it was like a military operation when we were leaving the house, because everyone had to leave at once because we had to put the garden remote sensors on and alarm the house, and you had armed response. And, goodness, forbid if I set this alarms off in the middle of the night. We'd have phone calls from armed response. We'd have to give them a code. And if we gave them the wrong code, they'd be there with guns running through the house. You have no idea what growing up like this as a kid is like. And this is where this fear comes from. And it's.
Well, let me ask you this, having both of you, Karin, I assume you grew up in South Africa as well?
Yes, I did.
The fear that those people are experiencing today is very real, isn't it, ladies?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Changed from what you're describing, Mel, and what you probably both had as experiencing growing up in South Africa. What we're seeing over there today is very real. And even in our country, this fear mongering, even though it is promoted in order to keep people under control, there is more to be fearful for. I never ever locked my house here. In all the 30-something years I've lived here by the ocean, I now have to lock my house. I have an alarm system. I don't go out anymore at night downtown Santa Cruz, because I am fearful of being raped, mugged, attacked, because it's happening. It is happening all around us. So things have changed.
Yeah. Yes, Georgia, they have definitely, because, you know, as Mel was saying, it happened slowly in South Africa. So from living in houses with maybe a fence around them, you then had burglar bars on your windows, and you had an armed security on call, and then you had electric gates, and then you had 8-foot walls, and then you put electric wire on top of the 8-foot wall.
Yeah.
And then you put in a security gate between the bedrooms and the rest of the house, and so on. But it happened in such slow steps that it became normal for you. No. And then you didn't let your kids go out the front gate on their own, and then you didn't let them out of the house on their own, and so on and so on and so on, until if everybody in South Africa doesn't have PTSD, I'll be very surprised, because the fear that you live with every second of every day. These people sleep with one eye open. There's a book that's just gone out by a South African who I spoke to the other day. It's called My Turn. And there's the most incredible tear-jerking story on there of people waiting for their turn to be murdered, raped and murdered.
Oh my God. Don't you know that those million people living in those squatter camps, Karin, are suffering from PTSD? Of course they are.
Absolutely.
How could you not be?
You didn't get there in a pleasant way.
No.
You didn't get there because you want to be there. You got there by increments. You lost your job. So you still had your house and your car, and your kids were still at a good school, but you ran through your savings. So now what do? You sell your cars, you sell everything excess. So you still have a home and kids in good schools. But the kids have now stopped their extramural activities because you can't afford it. Then you cut down on your groceries, and eventually you lose your house, and your kids can't go to the good school anymore. Now there's nowhere for you to go, because in South Africa, if you build a mother-in-law flat, you're not allowed to do that. If you're a white person, you may not. And I lived through this because I lived in a mother-in-law flat on my daughter's property. You're not allowed to do it. The zoning is not allowed for that. So they will come and say, you have to go. So, okay, now you can't stay with your friends or your family. Where do you go with no money? Now, these are people, professional people with university degrees who had good jobs, and they're on the street. They are not equipped for that, never had a plan or a thing in mind of how to cope when that happened. So they're on the street with a little piece of cardboard in their hand saying, no work, 4 kids, no food, nowhere to sleep, please help. Now, the newspapers publish long articles about don't help these people because they use it on drugs and booze. So do not help them. Now, yes, a percentage of them probably do. But they're equal amounts, if not bigger amounts of people who are in desperate straits. So yes, these people have PTSD. These people have no self-worth. They lose their self-esteem. The men in the camps, I was speaking to one of the girls who works in the camps the other day. The suicide rate amongst men in those camps is escalating. They found 2 men the other day who'd hanged themselves in one of the camps because they just couldn't face it anymore. Now, these poor girls that help in the camps had to go and cut them down.
Yeah.
And
Well, you know, Karin, the suicide rate in America is very high with white men.
yes,
Very high.
yes. And it's not surprising because, you know, to kind of, it is on subject, but it would be funny if it wasn't so sad. I was watching the latest Paris Fashion Week for men. They now have high heels for men. They have pantyhose for men. They have skirts for men. They have underwear that looks like women's underwear that they wear over their pants. And this lot come prancing down the what do you call it? The catwalk.
The runway.
The catwalk. They come prancing down the catwalk with their men's handbags and their man buns and their high heels and their fancy pantyhose and the women's panties, lace panties worn outside their pants. All they need.
I saw that, Karin.
Yes.
I watched
Now,
that too. Oh, my husband and I just looked at each other and said, the world has gone completely berserk.
yes, but if that is not breaking, excuse me, I nearly said a bad thing. Taking the testicles off of the white male, then I don't know. Because if this is what high fashion is, I don't know a single man myself that would allow that to be bought for them. In fact, my husband would probably kill me.
Let me jump in with that one over here, Karin, because
giving 0.1% of these transgender people so much press, so much attention.
Yes.
They make up the most minute population here, and yet it's everywhere, and it's being taught now. Even the drag queens are reading to our babies, our little children in our libraries. They are coming to the libraries. Why? To normalize transgenderism?
Yes, because
is that the reason they're coming in there?
There is a show host here in Texas. His name is the amazing Doc Green. Now, Doc Green is a friend of mine, and he saw the advertising for this at one of the libraries in Texas, and he went to go and observe. Well, he was arrested. He didn't have a film crew. He didn't have any. He went as a person to go and see what was actually going on so he could report on it. And he was arrested as he went up the front steps of the library because he's known. And so they arrested him for causing a disturbance. So
there you go.
Then he went to a city council hearing where the populace was telling the city council, we pay the library out of our taxes. We do not want this for our kids. He went to the hearing. He was rearrested before he could go into the hearing. And despite the fact that that we don't want it far outweighed we do want it, the city council decided that they are going to continue with these drag queens reading these books. Now, if you have a look at the book, it is telling 5-year-olds and preschoolers all about sex and abnormal sex and anal sex, and it is disgusting. I didn't speak to my child about stuff like that until she was about 18, the abnormal sex, and that was only when she came and spoke to me about it, because I don't believe the kids need to know this. And now they're demanding that those same books are part of the school curriculum.
Well, they're demoralizing us as people, and that I blame that on Hollywood again, and the music world, and the fashion world. They are demoralizing us as a people because they are forcing us to accept all of these things now as the new norm. And I just don't understand how they're getting away with it because it is such a small percentage of people that actually are in that kind of a situation. And what's really tragic to me is the doctors that are not promoting this, but helping these children, very young children, even pre-puberty, to be transitioned into another sex. I mean, if this isn't child abuse, what would you call it? To me, it's just child abuse.
Well, if you look at Charlize Theron, who is a very, very famous actress from South Africa, you call her Charlize Theron here, but she is very famous. Okay, now she has donated oodles of money to the ANC and the EFF in South Africa, and she adopted some little black children. Now her black son that she adopted, he must be about 6 or 7. She dresses him in a dress and girls' little pink sandals, and she's transitioning him. So you not only adopt out of your race, you then abuse that child horrifically because it is not part of black culture to transition children. It is not part of black culture for boys to be girls. It is not.
I don't know any culture that's part of. Do you? I've never heard of this.
No, but this woman is a disgrace to South Africa, you know.
Well, Kate Hudson, who is the daughter of Goldie Hawn, another Hollywood moron, she just had her 3rd child, Ranny, and she has decided that she's going to let Ranny, this newborn baby, decide what her gender is. She's going to raise her to let her choose. Now, please, what child born or a young child can make those kinds of decisions? And why in God's name isn't CPS coming in as they do come in on many good families? And if you spank your child, they'll take your child. But they allow this kind of child abuse to go on, confusing babies and young children to not know who they are. I mean, to me, this is the worst case of child abuse.
Yes, because they're
my opinion.
They're allowed to put gender X on your birth certificate now until you decide what you're going to be.
Right.
It's ridiculous. I mean,
insanity.
All you have to do is look inside your books and you'll know what sex you are because there are only 2 of them. But they're
And by the way, when Caitlyn Jenner dies, and if they did an autopsy on Caitlyn Jenner, they would have to say Caitlyn Jenner was a man.
Yes.
I mean, this is just the craziness that we're facing, but I think it's going back to what Mel said. It's all part of this big puzzle. This big agenda of how they can take us over in every way possible, keep us confused, keep us drugged up. You know, this whole marijuana thing now that's becoming a national interest now. We've got to make it legal for everybody to smoke dope. Well, yeah, because if people are stoned, they don't know what's happening to them. They aren't aware of all of their freedoms and the things that are being done to them because they're too stoned. I mean, it's just amazing that we have allowed this to happen.
Yeah. Mel?
I'm just looking at these photos here of Charlize Theron, and it occurs to me that this woman must be in on the agenda. Look, some of the films that she's done, okay, we look at Aeon Flux, where the symbol, of course, the triangle with the symbol of the all-seeing eye in the middle. That's clear sort of Illuminati symbolism, and the themes that were played out are very New World Order-ish, Orwellian, Brave New World type themes in that film. Again, Mad Max also. Same sort of theming that goes through those types of films. She must absolutely be a puppet. I don't believe that any mother in their right mind does what she's doing to her son unless she's somehow been probed, told, programmed, paid. I mean, these celebrities, she's one of the most famous actresses. She's, really makes one of the top earning actresses. It comes at a price. I wonder if this is the price, is that she's got to take these kids, probably why she's not had her own kids. She thought she'd adopt a couple of kids and make them part of the agenda as per what she's required to do. Because being so popular, she could somewhat normalize these kind of behaviors. People like Will Smith doing the same thing to his son, also dressing his son up in dresses. The kid wears dresses to school. And it's weird why these celebrities are doing this. I mean, this is not what I would consider in any way socially normal behavior. But then we also, they would probably argue, what's normal or who decided that dresses go on girls and that kind of thing. The honest truth is that as open-minded as I am, my brain ain't going to fall out. There's no way I'm going to dress a little boy in a pink frock to school. No, not being funny. Because, maybe he wants to take up ballet, but I'm certainly not going to encourage anybody who has a predisposition to homosexuality to come over to my little boy and hit on my little boy because he's wearing a pink frock. Maybe that's not what my little boy wants. Maybe my little boy will end up liking little girls as he grows up. Yes. I think you confuse the child and make those choices for them before they themselves have decided which orientation they wish to follow.
Is it possible that this evil sickness that we see permeating have taken these people in? I mean, is it possible that Charlize Theron do you think maybe it's just gotten inside of her where she no longer knows what she's doing, or is she a paid puppet of those evil people who want to transform our humanity? What do you think? I mean, these aren't stupid people. These are, as you said, successful people that have had fairly successful lives. How could they be so taken in by this? I'm trying to understand how this is occurring and why is it occurring, and is that evil force so strong that it has slithered in to people's consciousness where they no longer even know what's right or wrong? I don't know.
Well, that level of wealth, fame, and power, unfortunately, does sit on the dark side. You don't get to the place that she's at without making the fast impact. Selling your soul to the devil, and that comes with a price, as we all know. If you've ever read Christopher Marlowe's, it's Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, you'll know that in the end, Dr. Faustus had to pay the price to the devil. You don't get all of these gifts, these fame, fortune, talent, whatever, divinely bestowed or demonically bestowed, or privileges, without there being some sort of price attached to it. And that is always about playing into the agenda at some level, whether it's your appearance in mind-controlling Hollywood, brain fodder, or whether, if the fashion industry is a perfect example of this. I mean, they for years have been denigrating the female form, this size 0, no breasts, super skinny look, which is completely unfeminine, which I think was one of the first sort of defeminizing, very clear aspects that came out of fashion. And now they're going the other way with the men, feminizing them whilst making women super masculine. And, completely have this whole role reversal, which is playing out in almost every TV show we have, most popular TV shows we have going at the moment. Things like How to Get Away with Murder. You see it in all the Oscar wins, and all the things that get nominated and things that get a lot of attention. There is a subversive agenda of not only the sexual thing, but the whole black empowerment, white denigration thing. And it seems to be, they seem to be working hand in hand and part of the same agenda. which ultimately, as you say, comes back to the Georgia Guidestones. That's what it comes back to, is they are ultimately working to a point where they're going to get rid of us one way or another. And it looks like the way they're going about is they're going to get us to all turn on each other.
Yeah.
And have, get the blacks to kill the whites, get the whites to fight back and kill some of them, or whatever it might be. Get the Muslims to fight everybody else, in our parts of Europe, whatever the case might be. It's playing different subgroups against each other. So, they can just sit back and enjoy the carnage and make a lot of money off it because, of course, they're supplying all the weapons.
Well, this hatred that we're witnessing in South Africa, I have a very hard time wrapping my mind around people that can do these kinds of things to other human beings. And I'm actually quite terrified, to be honest with you, not only for those people, but for what is happening in our country with the stoking of this hatred. And Karin, I know on my show you mentioned that this could happen in America, because they are stoking this racial divide. Yeah. And I think you're right, Mel. They're going to partly get rid of us by having us all turn on each other and get into perhaps a civil war where a lot of people will be killed. This hatred, though, it's not in our DNA makeup as white Europeans and white people all over the world. We don't behave this way. We are civilized human beings. I can't even imagine doing the things that I am hearing are happening in South Africa to those whites and their families. And it frightens me.
Yeah, and rightfully so, Georgia. I have always said that unless you've lived in Africa, you will never understand Africans. You cannot wrap your head around it. And Mel and I never get really dramatic about the murders and the rapes and the tortures. Yes, we talk about it, but we don't go into the gory details because, in all honesty, Western civilization cannot wrap their head around that. No. And it is very, very frightening. It really is very frightening. If you look at the history of Africa with the Mau Mau, the things the Mau Mau did were just beyond belief. And I'm afraid that in South Africa, it is turning that way. But then again, if you look in the USA, with the influx of the it's not just Muslims, but it's they tend to be Muslim. Even those that are coming from North Africa, they tend to be Muslims, and you're having whole states overtaken by them, and the murder rates increasing and the rape increasing because they say that rape is part of their culture. They use that as a defense when they go to court. It's part of our culture. And so, I don't know. It's not part of our culture.
No. But do you think, so rape is part of their culture. I guess killing is part of their culture. I just don't understand why people don't understand why the two don't mix. You can't put cultures together that are that far and wide apart in how they live life. I just don't, I'm trying to understand why we are inviting this into, say, this country, and why it's being allowed to happen over there. Is the hatred just in their culture, or is it envy, which is a very deadly thing, and I think it's part of the problem in America? I think there is tremendous envy of people of color for white Europeans, particularly white European women who are really diverse. They have beautiful colors, eyes, hair, skin, diverse colors. They're not just mud-colored people with brown eyes and black hair. I mean, could it be something as simple as envy, or is it much deeper?
Mel is looking befuddled.
Just trying to get my mic to work, sorry. I do think it's much deeper than that. I believe that racism is an artificial mechanism of division. It's social engineering. You know, I don't necessarily say that I prefer the look of a beautiful white, Caucasian, blue-eyed blonde, because it's like saying that my favorite flavor of ice cream is chocolate, which I'm not that simple a person. I'm the kind of person that likes Rocky Road mint fudge or something exotic like that from Ben and Jerry's. You know, the same with people. I like the fact that I can travel and experience different aspects of beauty, different types of beautiful women. I wouldn't say one race is more beautiful than the other. They are beautiful in different ways. Like I wouldn't say I like Indian food more than Thai food. Sometimes I feel like Indian, sometimes I feel like Thai. They are different, unique, and enjoyable in their very different ways. And that's the thing for me about culture is deep down inside, I don't think as human beings, if we truly identify with our spiritual nature, that we would denigrate or look down on someone just because someone has less pigment in their skin or has darker eyes or a certain type of hair. All that is very, very superficial, as is the cultural programming. I'd like to believe that ultimately, left to our own devices without the manipulation of the powers that be, that we actually might be able to live in complete harmony. You know, yeah, we probably have our own cultures, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't enjoy each other's cultures while still choosing to return to our own. Some people might choose to adopt other cultures. Some people might choose to marry into other cultures. And again, that is their choice. I am all for freedom of association, which is part of our basic fundamental human rights, you know, our freedom of choice. You know, one of the things I didn't appreciate in South Africa was back in the day when they said that black women and black and whites couldn't marry. And I thought to myself, even back then, what happens just on the off chance that a black woman and a white man fall in love, or a white woman and a black man fall in love? You know, surely the love is more important than the color of their skins, because that's such a superficial thing. And if they should decide that that's what they want to do, they want to go off and get married and have a happy family, live forever after, who is anybody else to stop them from doing that? Yet, it shouldn't be a case where there's this forced race mixing, which is what we've seen, which actually ends up with one or another culture or both being completely destroyed or homogenized. And it's, you know, instead of having two beautiful cultures existing side by side, each sharing and preserving and appreciating each other's cultures, what you have is two cultures living in competition with each other, seeking to dominate each other and force each other's way upon one another. And that never ends up in a good place.
Well, show me an example. Give me an example, Mel, of where two cultures can coexist side by side and get along beautifully. Tell me where that is.
It doesn't exist. We've seen examples of this.
Is that not the answer to the question? It's not about color of skin. It's not about whether you're a blonde, blue-eyed beauty or a dark brown-eyed beauty. It is about culture. It is about thousands of years of cultures that are different, and they do not necessarily mix. Abraham Lincoln said he wanted to send the freed black slaves back to their motherland because he didn't believe those two races would ever be able to coexist together in peace and harmony. And I'm beginning to think maybe now he's right. Because I see it happening in my own country. We're not living and coexisting in peace and harmony. There is more black-owned white rape in this country. There's almost 0% of white-owned black rape. Now, why is that, Mel? That is a cultural thing.
Yeah, for sure.
That's culture.
Absolutely, but culture is also programming to a large extent. And it's difficult to say, because there's no way for anybody to say it's all genetics. I believe there's a fair argument to be put across as well for the whole nature-nurture debate. You know, what is inherently within us and what gets programmed into us because of the environment we're in, and how much of the environment we're in is determined by what demographic we're born into. So I don't want to put it all down to circumstance, because I do know a lot of people who have made it out of the worst possible circumstances to become the most remarkable people. Everything comes down to choice. Doesn't matter what color you are, what culture you are. You can choose to be a murderer or not. But we have had examples in South Africa where we've had great people. Our president Verwoerd, who was assassinated by the Rothschilds, he actively went about the process recognizing that the two cultures, the black people of Africa and the white people of Africa, could not be part of one culture. So he set aside what was called the Bantustaans, which is self-governing homelands for the black people. And unfortunately, the Rockefellers and Rothschilds absolutely hated this. Not only did it preclude certain parts of Southern Africa from International Monetary Fund loans, okay, it also created a situation where the economy suddenly flourished, even though there were no international loans needed, which of course flew in the face of the globalists. But also the globalists then took this whole process of preserving people's cultures and turned it into something called apartheid, which is simply the status of being apart, where we actually, and they made it a bad thing, and they put a suffering face on it by the name of Nelson Mandela, and they made everyone believe through media propaganda that if you were anti-apartheid, you were somehow pro-freedom, when the initial point of apartheid was really about cultural preservation.
Yeah.
And it was never, ever intended to be a denigration of the rights of black people. It was always about preserving their culture. And somehow that's what it became after they got rid of Verwoerd, because they wanted the system to appear to the world to be bad, because what they couldn't do is have these cultures preserved. They so severely needed to have what they were trying to do in places like Australia, which is, get rid of all the blacks and have one homogenous white culture, which they didn't actually work, because it turns out that we ended up being more of a threat to the globalists, which is why they're now trying to get rid of us, the white culture. But in the end, the whole thing that's happened in South Africa, it's actually backfired on us. In America, they talk about how they got rid of over 100 million Native American Indians. And in South Africa, we never did that. We didn't actually have a genocide against the blacks, not to the extent that it happened in Australia and Canada and America, not at all. And, I've heard so many white Americans saying to me, that's what we did to ours, and you guys didn't do that to yours. And look at what's happening to you. Now they've turned on you, kind of thing. And not that I would ever be, and I think
buy into this. We've gone around and conquered all these peoples, including Native Americans. The Solutreans were here 10,000 years before the Indians came. This is again history that they have changed and spoon-fed people to believe. When the people came to America, when those founders came to America, they didn't take any country. They built a country. There was nothing here. They, from the bottom up, built it. There were no roads and bridges and homes and this and that here that they went in and built it. Yeah. So I think it's this whole notion that somehow what we've been taught to believe is the way it really happened. Now, I have never, ever said, and I'm saying right here, that I do not believe any one particular race is superior to another. I do not. I believe all races have the right to exist. I don't think the white race is superior. What I am saying is we are all different, and we have the right to be with our own people in our own culture, practicing our own heritage, which I guess makes me a separatist. I guess that's what I've become, because I don't believe it works. I know it's happened in a multicultural situation like we have now in our country, that black people and white people will marry and together. It's inevitable. How successful that will be down the line, how successful that is even now, I really question, because I think we are tribal. As people, we are all tribal. We want to be with people who look like us, who think like us, who live like us. You can see it even in prisons. You will see the white men in a corner, the black men in a corner, the Hispanic Latinos gathering in a corner. People are tribal. Why can't we say that and not have that be labeled as a superiority or a racist kind of statement? I think it's just the way it is.
No, it's 100% right. We are tribal
That
by
is
nature.
exactly what South Africa was doing.
Yeah.
They were dividing the tribes, giving them their own homeland, because you have to understand there are more than 11 different black tribes within South Africa. So they divided them up and gave them their own homeland under their own chief, living with their own rules. But at the same time, we gave them modern things like airports, hospitals, schools, universities, roads, running water, sewage. All of those things we gave them at the white taxpayers' expense. They did not pay taxes. We gave that to them, but in their own areas, so that those 11 disparate tribes were not warring with each other or with us. We all lived separately, and the world came down on us and said, this is just not acceptable. You are horrible people.
Yeah.
I think that's the point I'm trying to make. That's
Yes.
what we've been loaded with, and I believe that's really not right. It's not right. It's not the way it should be, as I have said, and it's why I'm still on the air, though people want to take me down. I have never, ever come on the air and asked for any harm or anything to happen to any people of color or any other race. I have always been a champion of all races to thrive and to be self-actualized to their very best ability. But that does not mean that I am going to stand by and watch my people be demeaned and be replaced and be blended out into that world in order to satisfy all the victims of the world. I'm not responsible for people who are born into poverty, and neither are you two ladies. This is just the luck of the draw, I guess. I don't know. But it is time that we all take care of our own, is the way I see it. Take care of your own people. Take care of your own problems. Figure it out for yourselves. And then there won't be any blame game at the end of the day, because somebody, out of the goodness of their heart, tried to come in and actually help you make your life better, because there is no appreciation. Look what's happening in South Africa.
Yeah.
Look what they're doing to those farmers who've been feeding them for what, 12 generations? I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me. This kumbaya garbage that we're going to all hold hands and get along and go along and just be one big happy mosaic world, I think is BS. I really do. It doesn't work. Show me where it's working. I asked you the question, Mel. Where are two cultures living side by side who are really coexisting peacefully? Because I want to know where that is. And I will walk back what I said. I don't see it.
Let me just say to you that there was a period of time. My formative years was the post-apartheid era. Now, in 1990, I was in my mid-teens, only really starting to understand the world, and that's when, Mandela was released from jail. 94, finished high school, and that was my first year of university. So that was when I kind of sort of really began to understand concepts such as politics. Before that, you can't blame me for anything that happened before that, the apartheid years, because I was just too young. You can't blame children for that. They don't make the decisions that form the world at that point. So I really, my formative years was the generation of tolerance, where suddenly white people were taught that it's a bad thing to be disrespectful and mean to black people, and we had to start respecting them, and we had to start treating them as equals, because they were our equals, and they now were getting the vote. They were allowed to enter all the places that we were allowed to enter. We were allowed to eat in the same restaurants, use the same toilets, and all this kind of thing came in. And you know what? I was part of that generation that went, okay, cool. I, for the first time, coming out of an all-white school, went into university and had black friends. It was a novelty for me. I loved it. These people were beautiful. I had no issue with them, and I had no problem with okay, so this is the Rainbow Nation. Let's work together. Let's make this work. I was absolutely all for that. Yeah, let's embrace each other as brothers and sisters and equals. And you know, my cultures were different to yours, but let's meet somewhere in the middle. I was all for that. But it bit me in the back. By the time I came out of university, all of a sudden, I couldn't get a job because I was the wrong skin color. And I was like, oh, hang on, no, I've done my bit in tolerance and acceptance and in reforming my attitudes, my ways and ideas. Why am I now suddenly being punished? Where's the tolerance and Rainbow Nation and acceptance and peace and love and unity and all those wonderful things we were promised by Nelson Mandela? It was all just part of, you know, a very thin pseudo-veneer of beautiful talk, masking a much darker and deeper agenda, which would then eventually come to play out. So, you know, I'd love to...
Because I grew up in the South, and I grew up in the South where blacks and whites coexisted without a lot of violence because blacks knew they didn't cross the line, okay? And white people, at the time I grew up, I know there have been some atrocious things that have happened throughout history, and I'm certainly not in favor of any of that, or slavery or anything. But the point I'm making is when people don't have their power, they behave very differently. Since Obama became president of the United States, something has happened to the black people. And since the Hispanics are now in lots of governmental seats, particularly in California, something has happened to the Mexican or Hispanic people. They have become haughty. They have become nasty. They have become arrogant. They are not the nice people that they pretended to be all those years when they didn't feel they had a voice or any power. So I'm asking, do people resort to their true self of who they are once they're given a little bit of power? Is that when it changes? Is that when it changed in South Africa? That once the blacks, as we see now, are in charge, are they resorting back to who they truly are? Is that what happens with people?
I don't believe it's the nature of people. I actually think there's a lot of social manipulation and engineering coming in from the educational level, obviously the socioeconomic level, and then of course the media level. The media is owned by the government in South Africa, and they outright lie to the populations. They don't at all cover the aspect of farm murders or anything like that. So, you know, I think it's manipulation. My honest belief, I've grown up amongst these people in South Africa. Look, the majority of the black people there are actually really lovely. You know, you get them in there's a warmth within the native people there that you could, any person in the world could rightly envy. The tribal people, they're beautiful in their simplicity. You know, they're uneducated, but there's a beauty to them in the way they live, in the way that they've existed for thousands of years in these natural environments. And here, I've often questioned, you know, have we done the right thing as modern man coming along and civilizing them? And what we've done is we've actually taken their culture away from them. And in a way, I think slightly maybe they resent us for it. This is part of the backlash that we're getting. Certainly in places, the church came and missionaries came and forced people out of their native ways. They came into Africa and Southern Africa, and they did horrible things. They took, I mean, there's whole museums in the UK, and I've seen them at the Museum of Humankind, where there's drawers and drawers and drawers of bracelets and surgical instruments, and you can see some of these things were removed by force, like cut off arms and whatnot. From the London Missionary Society, stuff that they claimed were of the devil, which they confiscated from these black people. So there has been a lot of that has gone on, as you say, the slavery aspect there. But the thing is that we try to do the right thing. There have been moves towards doing the right thing, and there were even moves by the white people within South Africa to do the right thing on behalf of the tribes in the 1960s, and And yet they still won't freaking forgive us. They still want to hold on to this anger and hatred, project the blame, because they refuse to take responsibility. For me, that is the key. No matter who you are, what color you are, whether you came from a poor background. And my mom and dad came from very poor backgrounds. They're wealthy now, but they worked for everything they got. Nobody gave them anything. They weren't privileged white people. They worked their butts off. Now, in South Africa, we've got a situation where the black people can come and just take everything away from you. Never mind how hard you work. Nothing was given to my parents. I know I suffered being a kid with my parents always at work, to go with my mom to work on Saturdays just to spend time with her. So, now having to see these people who've worked so hard all their life to have a little bit of comfort in their old age, potentially having it all taken from them, you kind of go, well, no, hang on a second, how's this right? And how can these be brought back to the fact that they're white? That is where the dystopia confusion comes in, because it doesn't make any sense that it should be based purely upon their skin color.
And it is, Mel. It is. I mean,
How
Ramaphosa has
much,
plainly
Karin
said that.
and Mel, does IQ play in the coexisting of all of these races? It's a very unpopular topic, and you can be deeply criticized, to even discuss it. But I think IQ within the differences in people plays a major hand in whether people can coexist together. And I'm with you, Mel. I think we should have left those people alone. And I'm sure you're right. There are probably some really wonderful, wonderful South African, Black African people there. Maybe the mistake was trying to make them into something they didn't want to be.
Yeah. I think that's a big mistake on our part. There's nothing wrong with them beforehand, but trying to change them into our ways was completely arrogant. But that's what the church has tried to do, the Crusades and all that. The Roman Catholic Church has been responsible for major genocides across the centuries for that, and it's the church did this to the natives as well. But back to the IQ thing. I was raised in South Africa to believe, and this is what I apologize in advance if this offends anybody. This is what I was told, is that Africans were generally less intelligent and had less mental capacity than white people. However, as I grew up, I desperately wanted to change my point of view. But when I went into university, I, for the first time, had black classmates. Okay, English was not their first language, and they were taking lectures in English, so this potentially contributed towards it. But they were passing on lower grades than white kids, because they were given a bit of an advantage because their first language wasn't English. And even that I can understand was fair. They were passing on 33%, whereas white kids had to pass on 50%. Okay, so there was that, and I could still understand. All right, I would, if English wasn't my first language, kind of hope that people give me a bit of slack too. So I could kind of get that. However, I must say, in my time, I have met some absolutely brilliant Black people. I mean, highly, highly intelligent and highly, highly educated. Even with the works that I do, if you get into my dragonology body of work, it's very extensive. You won't believe how many highly intelligent, educated Black people I have. And a lot of them are people who grew up in Africa and they've ended up in Canada and America and in South America, but they're born in South Africa, and they've somehow come to understand my work, and they do not hate me for it at all. Because I'm white, or because I've spoken up with logic and reason without prejudice of racial nature of any kind. It's simply pointing out the facts of what they are. So back to your question. I, as a general rule, don't like stupid people. I have an intolerance for them. But I don't think that's got to do with what color you are. I have a lot of very intelligent people of non-white origin, the full spectrum, coffee color all the way through to black, but I also have a lot of intelligent white friends. That being said, I also have a lot of very stupid white friends. So,
Absolutely. And there's no question that in all people, in all races, there aren't always very smart, intelligent people. And I'm not even implying that. I'm talking critical mass here. I'm talking about across the board, not the special people. I know a lot of dumb white people, just like you said, idiots. But I'm talking about critical mass when you try to blend together cultures critically, with the critical mass of people. And you've got lower IQs on one side and higher IQs on the other, I think that is a problem. I think it's a problem. Whites are certainly not the smartest people on planet Earth. The Asians are. They outsmart us. So I'm not, again, trying to imply anything about whitey being more superior or smarter. I'm simply saying, if IQ isn't the issue, why is it not a subject that can be discussed? Because they have taken away James Watson, the man who actually wrote the books on the bell curve. They've taken away all of his honors simply because the man discusses how critical IQ is to cultures.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't have an influence on how people can coexist, why can't we talk about it freely and openly? I would never be able to say this on my radio station that I'm saying to you right now. My God, they would tar and feather me just for even bringing it up. But it's a fact. I believe it has a play in it. And again, not demeaning any other non-white people. One of my favorite people I've ever had on my show as a guest 5 or 6 times is Frank Raymond, a man from India who wrote Sweet Dreams and Carousels. He lives in Canada. One of the most brilliant people I've ever met. I have not met him, but had the pleasure of having to get to know through his book and the interviews I've done with him. He's a non-white, but he understands it. He gets it. He's speaking up for the absolute critical importance for whites to continue to exist on this earth, that the earth will not be a good place without white people who have given every great thing to Western civilization and shared it with the world. So it's not that they aren't out there. It's not that there aren't smart people. We're talking about masses of people. Bringing in these men and coming in from Somalia into our cities in this country, raping our women, driving on sidewalks, running people down. How do you explain that? This is just not behavior of people with any kind of real intelligence. You don't run up on sidewalks and mow people down.
No. That's psychopathic, to be honest.
The biggest sign of that for me is that in California, they passed a law that it's now okay to poop on the sidewalk. Now, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We never, ever had to have laws like that in this country or any other Western country. We now have to adapt to savages who don't know where to poop, and then they arrested that shopkeeper for hosing the poop off the sidewalk outside his store.
What?
He was being racist.
What?
So for me, yes.
That's right.
So now that for me is a microcosm of exactly what you are saying.
Oh.
I lived in San Francisco. My third child was born there. I love that city. My son still lives in that city. We are all horrified at what has happened to that magnificent city. There is feces and urine all over our streets, homeless camps. It looks like you are in a third world S-hole country. Now, that is happening in that beautiful city of California, and you're exactly right. To say anything about it or to try to clean up the mess in front of your business, you are labeled a racist.
Yeah.
That's what we've come to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can agree with Mel that there are many super intelligent Black people. There are. And there are equally many warm, loving Black people. But when it comes to IQ, I'm sorry, if this country has to pass a law making it legal to poop in the street, then we are dealing with people with very low IQs. I'm sorry. They have had in South Africa 26 years now. So the children coming out of university now were born after apartheid. So we can't say that it's not their first language. They have a choice of schools to be taught in, etc. We can't give them that benefit of the doubt anymore. And if they have recently said, that they're going to lower the pass mark now for only for the blacks, not for the Indians or the whites, only for the blacks, to below 30%, then I'm afraid there is a problem with your IQ.
Yeah.
There has to be a problem.
And I think it's a tragedy, like everything else, that we can't speak the truth anymore. You cannot, and that's why nothing gets fixed. It's why we can't solve these problems, because we're not getting to the real problem. We're band-aiding the problems. We're making excuses for these people. It is really time that we deal with reality and try to help them and place them in places where they can be successful. Like you mentioned earlier, Karin, trade schools, they are non-existent.
Yeah. And that I will say, no matter what you say about President Trump, he is trying desperately to make that happen. He is trying to make that happen because he realizes that of the however many jobs there are vacant in this country, they are all blue-collar workers, and we don't have the people to fill them. So he is trying very hard to reinstitute trade schools, because does it not make sense? I mean, varsity used to be for the creme de la creme of everybody. You had to get exemptions in South Africa in order to go to university. You had to be top of your class to qualify for university. Now you just have to be black. And with a 30% pass rate in grade 12, what we call matric, you now get preferential treatment to go to university over somebody who's got exemptions in every subject. And then you don't have to have, you just have to show up to pass, because they said these kids were writing an exam and they stood up and went on strike because the questions were too difficult. And they asked the teacher, well, how the hell are we supposed to know all of this stuff? You write the exam for us. And so the law was, it was taken to court, and the teachers at that university had to pass them, because it's their right to strike if the exam questions are too difficult.
There you go. And despite what Trump is trying to do and what he has accomplished, which is to bring the unemployment in the black communities down to the lowest it's ever been in our history, they still voted 88% Democrat in 2018. You see, I'm trying to say, we're dealing with a mentality here. It's a welfare mentality.
Yeah.
It's generations and generations of this victimhood mentality. Even Candace Owens, that very bright young woman who is speaking out along with Charlie Kirk and just spoke this weekend at CPAC. Even Candace Owens, as bright as she is, and she is a bright, shining star, her own family, who have been on welfare for generations and generations, are still on welfare. She can't even move her own family off of welfare.
Yeah.
So how do you change this mentality? How do we change it? I mean, we can't tell the truth. We can't say, well, maybe you don't belong in this university. You really can't pass the muster here. But you know what? We can train you. We can put you in a trade school. You'll be able to really earn a good living and have a successful life. Well, I think what's happened is they don't want that. They want the white man's life. They want the wealthy white man's life. They want to be rock stars. They want to have it all. They don't want to work for it in a trade school and build it the way millions of white middle-class men have done for decades. No, they're above that. We owe them, you see. We owe them because of slavery. Not to mention that only 3% of people in this country own slaves. Only 3%. Not to mention that black Africans sold their own people into slavery. Not to mention that the Jewish slave trade and the Arab slave trade was much bigger than the white people that owned slaves. And not to mention that half of the plantations in the South were owned by blacks who had black slaves. But you see, you never hear that, do you? You never see that in a movie with Mr. Spielberg. Oh, no. You see the evil white man being responsible to be president is saying. We need to pay reparations. Give me a break. I mean, really?
I want to bring that conversation back to what's happening to the whites in South Africa. Now, you're talking about a welfare society that has been taught for generations to depend on welfare. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this, but it is the truth. We are finding that the white people who are now in squatter camps in South Africa, we are going to find it impossible to reintegrate them into normal society once they have been there for more than 3 years. They have also learnt to live on handouts. They have also learnt that if you have a dirty backyard and your child is dirty and barefoot, the handouts will be bigger. They have learned that, and it is scaring the life out of me that this once proud nation is by force of circumstance being reduced to that. Now, the children that are raised in that know that when this little truck arrives with food on the back, you just form a queue and you get handed out a sweetie pack and loaf of bread and whatever, and that's how life is. They've never known anything different. And because most of them are not going to school, because you cannot get registered for school unless you have a fixed address, so they are not going to school. They're not being educated. They're not being exposed to anything outside of those squatter camps. Now, a friend of mine has bought a farm and has got, I think, 21 people that she has rescued from the camps and is now trying to reintegrate. You know, Lee, Mel, she's trying to reintegrate them into society by teaching them these same blue-collar skills that we're talking about, welding, because welding is a big thing in South Africa. You need security gates and burglar bars and things like that. So they're trying to teach them to make that because it's a saleable commodity plus a saleable skill. Sadly, people come and go at the farm because they don't want to work. They'd rather go back to the squatter camp where the white people will come twice a week with truckloads of stuff and hand it to them without working for it. Now, I fear mightily for these people because it is almost a third of the white population that is living like that. And from experience, I am told by two charities in South Africa, 3 years is the limit. After 3 years, they do not believe you can reintegrate these people.
That's scary, Karin.
It is very scary. It is very scary for me because here I am campaigning to get them out of that country and resettle them somewhere else. But
I don't understand.
will we be able
These
to?
are not people who were raised with that mentality. How in 3 years can you go in that direction?
You've lost hope. You've lost faith in yourself. You've lost confidence. You've been through hell. You've been to hell and back. A lot of these families have come from home invasions, attacks, rapes, from living in the bush before they could get a place in a squatter camp. They've been raped. They've been attacked. They've been damaged. They've been hurt. They've been spat on. They've been forced to stand on corners with a piece of cardboard where people swear at them and try and run them over and spit on them and take photographs of them to put in the paper saying that they're drug addicts. They have lost all faith. I interviewed a whole bunch of those people recently on Skype, so I looked in their eyes. Their eyes are dead. They have lost all hope of a better life, of anything. They have no self-respect, no self-esteem, no self-worth. The husbands are the worst. The men, those poor men. Those poor men. What they are, the protector, the earner, the provider, and yet they can't. They've failed through no fault of their own. And some of them have watched their wives and children being raped and hot oil poured on them and burnt with hot irons. They're dead inside. And I don't think, and they're not getting any help. They're not getting psychological help. They are not getting a support system. They are not getting anything from anybody, not even a meal. So those people have almost become non-human beings. And I don't know how you ever give them any of that back, especially the self-worth. I don't know how you give it back to them.
When a person loses their dignity, it robs them of their very soul. Yeah, I hear you. This is tragic. That is a depressing thing you just said to me.
So you were talking
3-year window.
You were talking about the welfare people, having lived on welfare so long, have become reliant on it, and also they deserve it. And a whole generation of white children in South Africa is being born to think, they're being born to think that that's all they're worth, and that that's how life is, and it will never change. And so we are raising a slave plantation of children, and it breaks me. It absolutely breaks me. I look at my grandchildren and just thank God every day that we got out of there and that they are not in those circumstances, because we're all one paycheck away from that. If we admit it honestly, we are one paycheck away from that. It could happen to us overnight. And do you really think that those kids deserve any of that?
No. No human being deserves that. No human being deserves that. That is very depressing. Very depressing, because it's just showing what happens to human beings when they are pushed to that point. Like you said, they're dead inside. They've lost all hope. There is no place to turn, no place to run to. They can't even get out of there to try to hope for a better or a new life. Oh my gosh, this is discouraging, very discouraging and very depressing.
Yeah, it is indeed. So you know, I just wanted to relate that to what you were saying about welfare people.
So you're saying that this is why the blacks can't lift themselves out either, because it's been a lifelong conditioning. They don't believe they can do it either. Even with all the opportunities they've been given, if you don't believe it inside, I guess you just don't believe it, right?
Yeah, and if you were born into that condition and have never known anything else, what is your motivation to strive to get out of it? It's what you know. It's the world you know. You become, sad to say, you become comfortable in it.
Yeah.
In your discomfort zone. It's a hard thing to say. But for me, that was a horrifying revelation when I interviewed these people. I don't think I'll ever publish in interviews, because it's just too demeaning for them, because they once, and not so long ago, were middle or upper class people with jobs, with good homes, with cars, with kids in good schools, and now they're dead. They are dead. This is a death sentence. Putting them in those camps is a death sentence for these people, and they feel lucky if they can get into a camp.
But let me ask you, Karin, if by some sheer miracle those people were allowed to get out, and our government took them here as, asylum seekers and let them come in, don't you think they could be rehabilitated here?
They could, but it's going to be a long, hard road. They're going to need a lot of care, a lot of medical care, a lot of support, a lot of love, a lot of understanding. They are victims of a war, and they have PTSD, and They're veterans of a war. That's all I can tell you. And it's going to be a long, hard process.
Yeah, but we can't give up, can we?
And Mel and I will never give up.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to
Well,
face
obviously,
this.
you think it is possible somewhere down the road, or you wouldn't be fighting so hard on their behalf. I mean, if you thought it was that hopeless, you would say, "Oh, that's it's just impossible."
No,
Hope springs eternal. There's always a way, I believe, if people work hard enough at it and care enough and educate others to understand what's happening. And that's what we're really trying to do here.
But Georgia, are you going to condemn somebody to death because they're a victim of a war? I mean, really, if we give up on them, it's a death sentence for them.
It is.
So are we going to condemn them to death because they've already suffered so badly that they can't? It's a horrible catch-22 situation. And Mel and I have to look at this and speak to these people every day of our lives and still be positive. It's very, very hard.
I can only imagine, because you've got actual contact. You are hearing these people. You are listening to these people. So that takes it to a very different level of somebody like me who's just hearing about it, reading about it, learning about it. I'm not actually involved to listen and to hear their stories and to hear their despair. So it is very different. And I commend both of you for continuing to try to help.
And yet we have an easy job. It's those people on the ground, like Lee, our friend Lee, who works with those people every single day. And she has to look those babies in the eye and say, I'm sorry I gave you bread yesterday. I don't have bread for you today. It has to go to someone else. She has to make those daily decisions, who eats, who doesn't, who goes to the doctor, who doesn't. And they are the heroes, not us. We have it easy. She has to make those decisions every day, looking at those little faces.
Mm-hmm.
And that they are the unsung heroes of this, not us, not us.
There's added complication.
On a very sad note, I don't think we, and I know you won't, we can't give up. I think one thing that has to be done, Karin, is we have to get this to the attention of our government here in this country. How can we talk about being concerned about other peoples from other countries who are fleeing countries that are not going through what you have described, these people in South Africa are? How in the world can they not address this at some point if it's brought to their attention?
Yeah, good question. Karin and I have been making noise about this for quite some time, and we are hopeful that at some point there will be some kind of reprieve, but the longer it waits, the more these people suffer and the harder it gets to reintegrate them. And then you have the added problem, as you say, if we do manage to get them out into a new place, they're so traumatized that reintegrating them to normality is near impossible due to the vast amount of psychological trauma. In fact, I believe that the trauma that they go through now is so severe that I really see, it's a rare breed of these people that will survive that level of traumatization and come out and be fully functional in a capacity within a society where they can, go on and live a normal life. I believe a lot of these people are so traumatized they'll probably need special care and counseling for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Well, if we're willing to, if this invasion with Venezuela takes place, and I have a fear it might, we will be flooded with those Venezuelans. You tell me they're not traumatized? They are as traumatized as what you've been describing, and yet we will welcome them here. And we will give them aid and help. So I don't care that these white South Africans are traumatized. We have a duty to help them as we would help anyone else. So I don't think we can, say, oh, gee, they're suffering with PTSD or they're suffering with all of these traumas. Any person fleeing those kinds of situations, of course they're suffering. But I'm fearful we're going to be flooded by Venezuelans if things go the way the neocons would like them to go, which is to do another invasion, take down another duly elected leader, whether you like him or not, and put in some self-appointed globalist puppet. And we will have to take those people in here. So I would rather see the South African people in here. I would like to see those people having an opportunity to work our agriculture. That's what they know how to do.
Yeah,
For the life of me, I don't understand it. If we have to have people from the southern border to pick our fruits and vegetables and to help us grow, why not the South Africans? That's what they've done for 12 generations.
Yeah.
That's a win-win, in my opinion.
Guys, we're heading towards the end of the show, so I just want to say it's been great and emotional and tearful, and always we're very passionate about this. Just thought I'd ask you for your media mentions, a little bit about your shows. If you guys want to talk about that before we head off.
Yes, thank you. I do a Wednesday and Friday show from 2 to 4 p.m. West Coast time. People that are interested can go to ZBS, Z as in zebra, B as in boy, S as in Sam, zbsradio.com. Click on Georgia, and all of my shows are archived there, including Karin, who guested with me on February 13th, and you can listen to Karin and I talking about the situation we've been talking about today. And I would welcome new callers, new listeners. I have a very wide, vast audience, believe it or not, around the country and outside the country. I've gotten calls from London, Saudi Arabia. It's amazing how networking works. I have not promoted this little show. It has grown by leaps and bounds once I began speaking on behalf on white European people and the white genocide that I am witnessing, and speaking up for the white South Africans who are really being genocided. The show is really taken off because people are waking up, ladies. They are waking up.
Yeah. Yes, they are. Definitely. I mean, there is hope. This is not a hopeless situation. There is hope. As long as there are people like us that are willing to fight the good fight, the hope is not dead.
Thank you for letting me participate and for putting the information out about my show. And as I said, I will welcome new listeners and callers. And let's keep this going. And Karin will stay in touch and maybe do a follow-up show on my show as progress is made. And I say that because I'm going to be looking for progress to be made in regard to these people over there. Let's make it happen.
Thank you very, very much, Georgia.
Georgia, thank you very much.
Pleasure meeting you, Mel.
Yes, thank you for your time, Georgia. Karin, just tell us a bit about your shows before we go.
My show is this evening at 8 o'clock Eastern Time on Resolution Radio. And we have a fabulous guest tonight, Dr. Peter Hammond from South Africa. Mel knows him well. He's talking about current events in South Africa, and it is an eye-opener, so do tune in. Thank you, Mel.
All right, guys, as we head towards the end, I just want to thank everybody who's tuned in. And of course, this will be archived on ccn.media. The show will be going out next week in our first season's earlier slot. That's from 7 to 9 p.m. GMT. And please feel free to go and check out any of the other work that I do. Check out dragonology.info, which is my extended body of work dealing with cultural anthropology, ancient history, all that kind of thing. And of course, my latest book, The Greatest Discovery, dealing with the oldest and largest advanced Asian civilization to yet be discovered. That's in the Kalahari in Southern Africa. And please do go download a free ebook copy of my book, The South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy, from my website, stopsouthafricangenocide.org, for those of you who want to get caught up with all the facts behind the scenes. And Karin and I hope to bring on some more guests who can help shed light on what's going on in South Africa, as well as how that ties into the bigger picture. And we will continue to keep the narrative going because it's important for people to keep hearing this and learn the truth about what's really happening in South Africa, but also learn that there are other people out there from other countries, such as Georgia, who are standing up and speaking out. People like you, Georgia, give our people a lot of hope. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, that's it for us from tonight. We will be back again next week, 7 p.m. GMT, for another episode of Stop South African Genocide. For myself, our guest, Georgia, and my co-host, Karin Smith, a good night, and we'll see you again. Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lady Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination. You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.